Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc. and Alternative Parties Books Publisher sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard.
Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Stay friends. We have another exciting guest on this podcast. He is running for U.S. Senate. His name is Andrew Horning, and I'm going to let him tell you which of the exciting parties he represents. So welcome to the podcast, Andrew.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I think it's going to be easy for me to remember your name. I'm running for U.S. Senate on the Libertarian Party ticket for Indiana in the year 2024.
Awesome. If we could get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Yeah, okay. Well, I have just recently retired from my real-life job. I've been working in product development, engineering, medical imaging devices and software for the past 40-some-odd years. And I have a part-time clinical job doing cardiodiagnostic testing, but mostly I'm retired. And I have been involved in politics for a very long time, both as a weekly columnist in Indiana's daily newspaper, a guy who organized protests. I've tried to sue the government several times. And, of course, I've run for office many times. So I've run for U.S. Senate and governor as a Libertarian, also U.S. House of Representatives as a Libertarian. And I've recently written a book about constitutional rule of law, which is kind of my big passion, called Relighting the Torch.
Okay. Sounds good. So, in case we forget, since you're talking about the book right now, where's that available? Is it available on Amazon or is it available elsewhere? Where can
it's available. Yeah, it's available on Amazon. You can get either the I've got Kindle edition, I've got hardcover, paperback, and audiobook.
Okay.
So however you want to consume stuff, I've got it on Amazon. So if you look up Relighting the Torch.
Relighting the Torch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Relighting the Torch. And in fact, the cover art shows Lady Liberty looking at a torch with the smoke coming out of it. The flame is out.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So for your office right now, could you please tell us what your platform is? What issues are you bringing to the table? What do you think are important issues to deal with?
Well, it's kind of funny. We generally subdivide issues into like these discrete things as if they don't all have the same cause. I mean, pick a problem, and at the heart of any problem that people complain about, there's corruption. So libertarians and third-party candidates and independents are really the only people who can, with any sort of integrity and a straight face, talk about the fact that our politicians have sold out our government a long time ago. And we've been warned about it. We've had people like Eisenhower warn us about not only the military-industrial complex, but also another term in that same speech that people forget about is the scientific and technological elite that, spies and people who were already spying on Americans a long, long time before we heard about it from the NSA and CIA and FBI standpoint. So we've had a corrupt government for a long time. There are now people that are starting to document this exhaustively, like Whitney Webb's One Nation Under Blackmail. It's a huge 2-volume set. It's no longer a secret, but I mean, we should have known it for a long time. And in fact, I think if you ask anybody, they'll tell you that, they agree that our government is corrupt. We just don't vote like that. So whether it's war or whether it's what's happening to Social Security or going across the border, all of those issues are really just symptoms of a much greater disease.
Okay. So the government is the root of all this evil.
Well, it depends how you define government. The government doesn't work the way the Constitution says the government should work. I mean, legislators don't really even write most of our laws anymore. It's mostly unelected bureaucrats and executive agencies. And we've got INGOs, NGOs, big corporations like BlackRock and lobbyists and bundlers and kingmakers and puppet masters galore that really determine what happens in Washington, D.C. And they, more than the people on the ballot, are really the government. So, I think it would be fair to say that the CIA and BlackRock have more power than the president does.
Okay, so cronyism is the big issue here.
Yep, that's one way that this system works. It isn't all cronyism, because some of it is, people that are not particularly friendly, just telling people what to do. And it's not like, you could say that lobbyists are cronies and corporate titans are cronies, but there are things that are going on with blackmail and subterfuge and buying people off and sneaky things behind the scenes that we've known about for a long time. It's not secret. A lot of this stuff has been declassified over the years. And, some of the big lies, like how we got into Vietnam War when we only, we found out that the second day of the Gulf of Tonkin incidents never even actually happened. So we've been lied to about very big things for a very long time.
Okay. So here's a question. Some people are going to say that it's okay if the government lies if they do it for a noble reason. I assume that you would staunchly disagree with that. Is that correct? Yes.
Let me just explain that. We are supposed to vote based on what exactly? What should be guiding our votes?
The character of the candidate.
Well, shouldn't it be facts? Well, how do we even know the character of the candidates if they lie to us? Shouldn't it be facts? If we don't have truth, then we are voting on lies. And voting on lies is a really bad way to run a government. If they trust us to vote at all, why would we tolerate lying? Why would we tolerate so much secrecy? I know that we're going to have secrets and spies. You can't get around that. But they're not even accountable to our U.S. Congress. And the U.S. House of Representatives is supposed to be the people's representative in our government, where they're supposed to control our money, the way money works, and keep the banks accountable. They don't. They delegated that to the Fed. They're supposed to be the ones that authorize wars. They haven't done that since World War II. They're the ones who are supposed to authorize spending and all of this stuff. Everybody else authorizes spending now. So, you've got unelected bureaucrats, you've got presidents, you've got judges, and you've got, people that aren't even, you've got black operations funding from the CIA and FBI, where they even fund themselves with operations like Iran-Contra. So Congress is supposed to be our eyes and ears. They're supposed to tell us what's going on, and they're being blackmailed. That's been going on since, J. Edgar Hoover was blackmailing congressmen way back when. So, we don't have anything working the way it's supposed to. Our government is very untrustworthy. It's extraordinarily powerful, and it lies to us. It spies on us. It takes things from us and does things that we wouldn't want with our money. So, we've got a big, big problem, and it's all rooted in the fact that none of this is operating according to the Constitution.
Okay. So how are you going to bring the Constitution to dominate again?
Well, first of all, it wouldn't be me doing it. It would be voters.
Okay.
Our government is just our mirror, right? It's like our armed avatar. So government is an abstraction. You can't poke government and make it bleed. It's our delegated power. So the only way for voters to tell our government, this big abstraction, to change course, or the only way we hold its reins without getting violent, is with our votes. We have the power of peaceful revolution. That is the whole point of elections, is not to hire politicians, it's to fire them. And we don't ever do that. We keep rehiring incumbents. We hire the same parties and the same people over and over again. And it's frustrating that, we keep, asking for term limits, but we keep asking for term limits from incumbents as if they're going to give them to us. And the fact that, that I would still be, if I got elected to the U.S. Senate, and if I was the only libertarian, what that would say is that people have had enough and they put me in office, and that would be powerful, and I would have a microphone in my face every day, and suddenly people would be hearing not only the Democrat and Republican viewpoint, but they'd be hearing another viewpoint they've never heard.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yep, I think so. That's why I'm hoping for this.
So that's why you're open to it?
Well, that's why I'm hoping for this. I'm hoping to get elected, but it's not up to me. It's up to voters.
Okay. So how are you reaching the voters? What's your strategy for getting the word out in the Senate race here?
Well, it's the same as everybody else. Unfortunately, hiring politicians is nothing like hiring any other position. I mean, we wouldn't hire janitors the way we hire politicians. So, I wish people would actually look for candidates, but they don't. I wish they would, show up to public forums and debates and all that stuff, but we've been getting less, people get less and less involved in politics. They're more and more unwilling to listen and talk about it. And it's very frustrating. And so everybody now, rich and poor, whether you're a major party candidate or whether you're an underdog, we all have to raise a lot of money, and we all have to do this ridiculous game of bumper stickers and yard signs and billboards and advertisements to try to bust through the media deluge that we're all under and try to grab voters by the collar and, get them to at least hear our name. And, that whole idea that name ID works, the idea that yard signs work is very frustrating. And I keep hoping that voters are going to snap out of this and realize that voters have to take control of elections. That elections are not for candidates. They're not about candidates. Elections are all about voters. And voters have to take control of this operation. And, just like any other hiring operation, you wouldn't expect, if I was wanting to be a janitor at Google, I wouldn't be putting billboards all around all of the, Google offices and expecting them to, come to me, with, Andy, he says he's going to make janitorial services great again. It shouldn't work like that. It should be that a company puts out, I want to hire a janitor. And you, as the janitorial, candidate, you send them references, you send them your resume, and you let them know in some kind of way that you have qualifications for the job. They are the ones that are looking, though. They are the ones that are going to look at the information. They're going to look at all the candidates, and they're going to make a decision. We don't do that. We've got this weird thing where we pick from only 2 janitorial groups, and we ignore all the other people who could be much better janitors. And, actually I probably should say plumbers, because I think, an awful lot of what we need right now is somebody to flush. We need a toilet plunger going to Washington, D.C. to, plunge away an awful lot of corruption and nasty stuff that's in our plumbing right now. And I can't believe that, with as bad as things are getting, with obviously the buying power of the dollar is dropping like a stone, so everything is getting more and more expensive. I can't believe that we're not getting mad enough to start taking to the airwaves ourselves, writing letters to the editor, looking for candidates, calling them up, because our information is public record. They can find out where we live. They can find out our phone number. We want to have them contact us through our websites and all of that. But it just doesn't happen that often that people actually do that.
Okay. So how are we going to change this? Because I'm thinking about your analogy between a company. A company is an entity that's connected together. Voters are not necessarily connected together. So how do voters en masse invite the candidate to interview for them? Like Google is a company.
That's just it. You're bringing up a good point, because we used to have more public forums at local levels, and they still exist. And so, there are going to be candidate forums. I'm going to be going to one in just a couple of weeks. I'm going to be traveling all over the state, going to every group I can find. And so, yes, I will try to reach people where they are, and everybody has to do that. The problem is the media doesn't generally show up for a libertarian. We have to make our own media. So I've started a podcast, but it takes a while for people to find the podcast, and then the fact that people are probably listening to podcasts that are more interesting to them, about how to raise cats or something like that. And if we knew as much about sports, if we cared as much, if we knew as much about politics as we care about sports and know about sports, everything would be great. But, we have to just take more interest in this. And so as I travel around the state and go to these groups, it's unfortunate that unless I had $1 million to do this, and really to get all over the state and really reach people through radio and TV and Facebook and Twitter and all of the ways that people are now filling their eyes and ears with stuff. For me to do that would take a lot of money. And so I've got to do fundraising. I've got to do all of this stuff the other candidates do. It's just that they have much more access to, well, frankly, the bad guys. All of that corruption it starts in campaigns. And I think we all understand that the campaign donations come with strings. And you see that both Democratic and Republican Party candidates get money from the same financial services companies, the same investment groups, the same military industrialists. So they do roughly the same thing when it comes to all of the important stuff, because it starts with those campaign donations that independents, third-party candidates, and we libertarians just don't get. And you can see why, because we're opposed to all of that stuff.
Yeah. So if the candidates didn't do what the donors wanted them to do, would they find out that the donors wouldn't back them anymore, or has it never happened to a great extent so we wouldn't know for sure what would happen?
Oh, it always happens, and we hear about it even. There are some people that talk about that pretty openly. And you can see, based on, for instance, Mitch McConnell, the way he kept power for all of these years is that he went directly to the corporate leaders who would then make it plain that, that all of the people that were underneath him in the Senate, you're not going to get reelected if you don't do what I say, because I've already talked to the people who give out money. And it happens all the time. You one bad vote is maybe sometimes all it takes for you to get primaried out of your next election. So whether it's the House of Representatives or the U.S. Senate, the fact is you've got, these people who gather up power, maintain power by their connections to money. And that's how, the reason Mitch McConnell has finally had to step down is because people are getting sick of this. And it's finally, I'm going to give you some good news here. It's finally starting to happen where people are starting to push back, and they're starting to get sick of all of this crazy nonsense with Ukraine and Israel and the fact that we're going broke and we're pouring money everywhere on the planet except here.
Exactly. And I've heard that you mentioned Israel. AIPAC is one of the biggest donors to both parties. We've had guests on the podcast talk about that.
Absolutely, it is. Now, this is a very difficult thing to talk about, because you know how quick people can be labeled as anti-Zionist or anti-Jewish, and they're not even the same thing. I mean, truth be known, I've actually got Jewish in my, it's pretty distant, but on my mom's side, the Czech, from the Czech Republic side, I've got Jewish ancestors. I'm not anti-Jewish. I'm not really even anti-Zionist, but we have to understand what has been going on over there for the last 120 years. Lawrence of Arabia. I know people have seen the movie, but there was an actual guy who documented what was happening when the Western powers were tearing apart the Ottoman Empire, before and during World War I. And the fact that, we had made promises to the Palestinians through first of all, through the League of Nations, they made big promises of autonomy to the Palestinians. But by that time, there was already a movement with the Western powers, kind of like the way we started up Liberia to, push, frankly, black people out of this country, get rid of them. We were doing the same thing with Jews. We wanted to get rid of Jews, so we started up, a lot of the people who were Zionists in the 1800s were not fans of Jewish people at all. And in fact, I don't know how many people realized that during World War II, we didn't allow, an entire ship of Jews who were trying to come to the United States. We wouldn't allow that ship to make port. They had to turn around and go back because we did not want Jews here. And so there was a strong movement to push Jews to Israel even though we were making at the same time promises to the Palestinians of autonomy. And for a while, it was the land was being bought up. It was kind of done in a proper way where, if they buy the land and people sell it, okay, there's no problem there. But it started becoming increasingly political, especially after, obviously after World War II, when the Arabs, because of what we did to the Arabs already, we were breaking promises. The League of Nations broke their promises. They passed it off to the British. The British broke their promises. All of the Western powers, including the UN, broke promises to the Palestinians. And that happened all across the Arab world, where they ended up taking the side of the Axis. They were working with, Hitler, because we had been so bad to the Arabs for so long that, of course, after World War II, Arabs and Western powers were enemies. We did not like these people except for the Saudis. Somehow we allied with the Saudis. We ultimately tied the U.S. dollar to the Saudis with our petrodollar system. And we've had this love-hate relationship with all sides of this conflict for a long time. And the Israelis have not been, an easy ally either. I mean, they actually, if you look up what happened to the USS Liberty, they intentionally blew up one of our ships, when we were trying to monitor what was going on in one of their wars. And so we've had an ugly relationship, and everything we have done overseas, whether it was our CIA that was destabilizing governments and doing things on the sly, or whether we were sending our own troops, or whether we were sending mercenaries, everything we've done over there has been disastrous. We've only made enemies. We have no business being involved in other people's stuff when we can't even handle ourselves.
Good point. So, since we're so entrenched in this and entangled in this, how would we get rid of it? Would we tell Israel no more money and then that'd be it, and then they'd be left to themselves? Or how would you propose we would get ourselves out of this?
Well, Israel's one of the richest countries in the world, right? So, I mean, they've got a very high standard of living compared to, most nations on this planet. They've got 190 more nations that, Israel's got a very high standard of living. They've got tremendous technological capabilities. And remember, we fund both sides of every conflict. We sell weapons to everybody. So for every, dollar we give to Israel, we're giving money and weapons to their enemies too. And it's an absurd scenario where, an awful lot of the weapons that have been shot at both Israel and now, of course, everybody else on the planet, in Africa and all across, Europe and everywhere. It's U.S. weaponry. And we've been doing this forever. The military industrialists make money no matter what. The bankers make money on debt. What makes debt better than war? So between financial services people, the sort of Rothschilds way of funding both sides of a conflict because that one of them is going to win and everybody's going to have to pay off their debts to the banks first before everything else. Bankers always are going to clean up. And so the bankers and the military industrialists have no interest in peace. Why in the world would they ever want peace? And we should know that. And we should be the ones to say, no, we can't keep voting for the people who are doing this to us. And yet we do. And we've had, that phrase military industrial complex has been known for 60 years. Well, I mean, it was, 1960. So more than 60. So Eisenhower gave us this beautiful phrase. And in fact, General Smedley Butler wrote, even before this, he wrote, this little pamphlet, and he gave speeches, and it's called War is a Racket. We should have known a long time, even before Eisenhower, that war is a racket and the military-industrial complex is a dangerous thing, and that we need to keep that bad boy on a leash. That's kind of like at best, the military-industrial complex is a junkyard dog. You don't want your junkyard dog to get out. You got to keep it behind a fence and on a stout chain, and we're not doing that. I mean, I'm one of those people that believes in a very strong national defense. very strong individual defense. I believe in the Second Amendment very strongly, but part of the Second Amendment was also that we were supposed to be keeping track. If you look to see how the original military design was, where we did not have permanent standing armies, and we did have a permanent militia system comprised of citizens, kind of like the way Israel and Switzerland had always done. We were supposed to be personally responsible for our nation's violence. And if, I'm now too old, at 66, they're not going to send me off to war. But until, I was in my 50s, maybe until I was 60, they would send me off to war as a militia member, unless I said, I'm not going to vote for any of these people who are going to be committing me to foreign wars. I want to stay home. I want to protect my own farm and my own family. I don't want to go shoot people, that I've never met, that I have no personal beef with all over the planet. And so part of the design of a citizen militia is that not only is that the strongest possible national defense, nobody can ever beat a militia. And the other part to that is a militia doesn't want to go out looking for trouble all over the planet. And that's one of those things that, people never think about that part of the Second Amendment, but that was part of the Second Amendment. And that, we were supposed to be accountable for our state and nation's violence, and that we could be called up personally, to go shoot people. And we would think long and hard about doing that because, unless you're a real sicko, you don't want to leave your family and leave your job and sacrifice so much to go shoot people you've never met. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, we think it's so much more civilized to train our young people, our kids, to go get killed, because we're so scared over here. No, let's send our kids to go die. And there's nothing civilized about that. Like you have a job to do. If it's important enough for people to get killed, you should be personally accountable to it. And that was part of the design, and we lost that.
That's a lot of heavy stuff, Andrew. That's
the kind of stuff that's the kind of stuff I'm hoping to, people get to hear, because they don't get to hear it. And it's all in the Constitution. If only we were, I've heard a lot of people say, I read the Constitution in high school. And then I ask them, what really did you read? And it turns out they only read the preamble. That almost nobody has ever actually read the U.S. Constitution, and it's short. And you could read your state constitution and the federal constitution, plus the anti-federalist papers and federalist papers that were all about all that stuff, and you would still not have half of what a romance novel is in length. They're way shorter. So it's not that it would take a great deal of study. And in fact, every one of the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, they're only one sentence each. And yet, most people have no idea what those 10 sentences really say. And we should, but we're the only ones who could defend them.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
I'm glad you're bringing
that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I'm doing my own podcast on, constitutional rule of law, because people need to know what we've been throwing away.
Okay. What's the podcast name?
Well, it's just my name, Andrew Horning, and, I hope to get fancier shortly. I've only put up 3 so far, and only one of them really is starting. My last one, just from last week, that's the first one that I'm directly getting into the Constitution, and I'm going to do another one, hopefully by Friday. I'll have another one, and then I'll do one every week. And so I'm going to have a regular series on the Constitution, and I'm going to try to make it simple and relevant, so I'm going to be talking about what's going on in today's world that's being impacted by our lack of understanding of the Constitution. And then just go over, how this is really supposed to work. And you think about how, the first 3 articles, talk about the exclusive powers of the legislature, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. And just the first sentence in each one of those articles is violated by just about everything going on in our government right now. And, there's so much violation of the constitutional rule of law that it's kind of silly when I hear people, frankly, like people talked about constitutional experts and people who taught constitutional law, like, for instance, Obama, who said, I've got a pen, I got a phone and I got a pen. I can do whatever I want. That's not what it's supposed to. That is so unconstitutional. And yet, because we say, well, he's a constitutional expert, we believe them. And we have not read the words ourselves. We have to read the words ourselves. There are not that many of them. We can do this. And if we understand the power of knowledge and our accountability for our own lives, we're suffering from an awful lot of stuff that we've been voting for. And if we start understanding what it is that, we are owed by constitutions, we are supposed to have this leash on our government. That's what the Constitution is for. Not a leash on us, it's a leash on our government. And if we were to understand exactly how we were supposed to use this on Election Day, then we would have no cause for complaints because it would all be our choice. We have already chosen all that we have right now. I mean, we don't really have any excuse. We have lots of nations that never had elections, and even they can overthrow their government when we can just do that with a press of a button, peacefully and orderly. And we have all of these processes that can help us with our daily lives if only we knew and if only we insisted on it.
All right. So can you send me a link to your podcast and I can try to include it in the show notes?
Sure, I will do that, and I will send you a link to my book and my website. And I've been blogging for decades too, and I've got blogs on an awful lot of issues as well.
Okay, if you want to send that to me, I can send me the links. I can probably easily include it in the show notes.
That sounds great.
And our listeners, when they want to support your campaign, they can click your campaign link. Yeah,
my website is horningforsenate.com. I didn't do anything fancy with the 4. I did just the FOR, not the number 4. So horningforsenate.com.
Okay, good. That's simple. That's easy to remember. That's good.
Yeah.
Andrew, we're happy to hear that you are seeking to restore the dominance of the Constitution. That's what we're about. So we appreciate that, and we wish you all the best in your campaign.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it, Andrew.
All right. We wish you all the best in everything in life. Take care, and may your campaign go excellent.
You too. Liberty or bust. Thanks.
Bye now.